Okay.
Hi, Simon. Welcome. I think we are ready to start. Welcome to our very first BOA career session. My name is Mathilde Cabenda. I am head of product management and marketing for our job orientation and study orientation tools at ZEIT Online. And today's topic, as you all know, is decision making. As you all know, decision making can be really tough. Especially in the beginning of our career path, we have to face a lot of major decisions. But also on the job, as a professional or as an executive, we all have to face multiple decisions every day. So let's try to improve our personal decision-making skills. To do so, I have invited two real experts in decision-making today. I'm really happy to welcome Julia Dhar and Simon Müller. Julia Dhar and Simon Müller are the authors of the Decision Maker's Playbook. It's a very useful workbook published by Pearson that I could recommend you all. It gives a lot of practical advice by the use of mental models. And mental models, we will learn a lot about that today later on. But first of all, some introductory information for you guys. This session will take about 75 minutes. We will get some keynotes, but we will also have time for your questions. As you can see, we have a chat window. It is set on private, so we as the moderators can see you and see your messages, but they are not able or visible for everybody. I hope you can hear me, guys. I see in the message that some person has problems understanding us. Maybe you could give me an emoji or something. Yeah, okay, I think most people are able to hear us. Okay, glad to see that. This session is also recorded, something you should know. So people will be able to watch it later on. Also, you guys, you will receive a wrap-up mail after the webinar where you find some useful information about mental models and the book. And you are also able to watch it again if there's something you would like to see again. Okay, so I think we should dive deeper into mental models and into our topic. But first of all, we would like to get to know you guys a bit better, our audience. We are not able to see your cameras, unfortunately. We are too many people today, but we have a little poll prepared for you to get a better understanding of your situation. So we would like to get to know you a bit better. What is your current career situation? I can see many people already answered it, but I will wait for some more. We are over 50, 60 now. Okay, I think we can look at the results soon. Yeah. Okay. So it's a mixed field. I see professionals, I see students, I see young professionals and also college students, but the biggest part is professionals. I think that's good to know because Julia and Simon might refer to your situation also in their talks and in the questions afterwards. Okay, so let's dive deeper into the topic and get to know our keynote speakers a bit better. Let's start with the ladies. Let's start with Julia. Julia Dhar is a partner at Boston Consulting Group, and she is also a behavioral economist and a strategic policy advisor. And she is also, what I really liked, she's a debate champion. What I didn't knew before, that debate is a really professional field. She won the debate championships for 3 times, the debate championships for schools. And she was also a former private secretary of the finance minister of New Zealand. Julia has some really interesting TED Talks. If you're interested in TED Talks, I love TED Talks. She has 2 TED Talks about debate and about the importance of finding common ground and how to productively disagree. And she also studied at Harvard, which is interesting because I think that's where she met Simon, right?
That is exactly right.
Yeah, welcome Julia, welcome Simon. Simon is the other co-author of the Decision Makers Playbook, and he also graduated his master's in public administration at Harvard, but he also studied economics in Mannheim and Heidelberg. So as you can guess from his name and the university countries that he's also German, like me. What you should also know about Simon is that he was also a consultant at BCG for quite a long time, over 10 years. And he also worked for the think tank there. And he advised clients in the fields of technologies and the strategic decision-making topics, something we will talk about today too. And Simon is also co-founder of the Future Society. The Future Society is an NGO which advises policymakers on the reasonable use of emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence, data mining, things like that. Yeah, so welcome Julia and Simon. I would like to get to know you a bit better first, and what I was wondering, Julia, is what motivated you to write a book about decision making in the first place?
First, good afternoon, everyone, and good evening, good morning around the world, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today on a topic that we care a lot about. For me, it's really simple. We spend our whole lives making decisions, whether you're aware of them or not, and deciding not to make a decision, letting someone else make a decision for you, just waiting to see what will happen. All of those things are decisions, even if they don't feel like it. That's a long way of saying over the course of a day, we're making hundreds of different decisions. Some of them are very important, some of them are not. But it is also a skill and a practice that we can get much better at. So it started with a very simple idea of imagining that the quality of the decisions that we make as individuals, as organizations, as businesses, as countries, if every single day those could get 10% better, 1% better, imagine what the possibility might be that comes out of that. And that's the starting point from the book, is are there a set of evidence-backed, but maybe a little bit surprising, very practical tools that will help readers make better decisions in their lives and work?
Yeah, I think this would be a better place if only 10% of our decisions would be better. I agree. Talking about our session today, what do you have in store for us today, Julia?
Well, we want to share a couple of things. I mean, partly a little bit about our own journeys and how we get to this conversation, and how these really critical decisions that are in front of some of you today, how these concepts might be valuable to you. But I almost think about it in two parts. So part number one, Simon is going to share with us some frameworks. We call them mental models, a kind of map of the world or a way of making sense of the world that might be useful to you as you confront some big decisions. And once you have those mental models in mind, I want to spend a little bit of time with you turning those into tactics, saying, okay, but like, when we hang up the phone, 72 minutes from now, what are some things that you can do immediately that will be able to put those into practice? And most importantly, we want to hear from you. We want to hear your questions, the things that are challenging you, and see if we can apply the tools and practices of the book to the work that you're doing, to the decisions that you're facing.
Yeah, I think that's a really good mix of topics, and I'm really excited to learn more. But first of all, I think to get a better understanding of the basic techniques you use, I would like to dive a bit deeper into mental models and what mental models are. Simon, you choose to use mental models in your book with Julia, and why exactly do you use mental models, and what do the mental models you used have in common in the book?
Thanks. Thanks a lot for the introduction, by the way, and glad to be here, and hi to everyone dialing in. I heard this was a very popular course and popular webinar, so I hope we can deliver the high expectations. Mental models, right? It's a very technical term. It terms, it sounds, it sounds complicated, etc. What it is it's simplification of reality, right? Reality has a fidelity, right? That rhymes even. Reality is so complex, right? That it's very difficult for us to take in all the data points, right? Take in all the specific, bells and whistles, all the details in reality, and then make, fundamental important decisions. So what we do, and we do this automatically, right? Mental modeling is just a process to make this more explicit. What we do is we create simplifications of the world, right? We simplify dramatically. And so those are mental models, and it really is an exercise in getting better at modeling the world, right? Getting better at understanding reality, and that's how you improve your decisions. You discard mental models that doesn't work. You create new mental models that help you, get to terms with reality and be effective. And just to give you an example, right? And I guess you can call this also theories, right? But I'll give you an example, two examples. A very, very easy one, right? If I take this bottle, right, and let it go, right, I'll drop it. It will fall to the ground. It won't break because it's made of a certain material, right? But that's a theory, a mental model that is proven, and we have enough data points to believe it. It's a very, very solid theory, very solid mental model. Now compare that, for example, with the fact, or the statement that if I eat a steak every lunch, right, every day, I'll get fat. Well, this mental model is it's based on, or this claim is based on a mental model of nutritional science, right? That fat, the steak is very fat, and fat has a very high calorie density, and so eating steak will make us fat. But that's actually interesting, right? So, because this is a mental model that has been told for a number of years, and nutritional scientists don't really agree on it. In fact, some people are now, doing keto diet, for example, and eating only butter and meat, etc. And it seems to be working too, right? So they don't get fat. By the way, I'm vegetarian. Just want to put it out here. But those are examples of mental models that are not as valid, right? And so we would invite you to really look at the world in terms of, pattern searching, right? So what are some things that you that are true in a repeated way, and how can creating those patterns and those mental models make it easier for you to make decisions?
Okay, thanks, Simon. You're not visible right now, but I hope, yeah, you're back here.
Yeah, and I apologize. My screen is dropping in and out. I hope you got the statement.
Yeah, we got it perfectly fine, I think. Thank you. So before we dive deeper into specific mental models that we can use, I would like all of us to take a moment to reflect. I really liked a quote in your book that said, a problem well stated is half solved. And I think this is a really positive way of looking at questions or problems we are facing in our everyday lives. So I think this is something we should do all together. And I would invite each of you, of the participants here today, to take a moment to reflect and ask yourself the question you all already saw for a second. The question is, what questions or decisions are you facing right now? What are you maybe also struggling with, or potentially struggle in the near future with? You can take a moment just for yourself. You can write it down privately, but you could also post it in the chat. It will only be visible for us as the moderators, but it's interesting for us, Julia and Simon, as well, to use it maybe as examples for techniques. What questions are you facing? I see active messages popping in. really personal, specific questions. It's a lot of career decisions, as I can see so far. It's decisions like, do I want to do a PhD? Should I take the next career step or wait? What should I do after school? What should I do with my life? Job-wise, really big decisions. And as I mentioned in the beginning, it's the big decisions, the major decisions, especially in the beginning of our career path, that we are struggling with because we know that they have a great impact on our lives. So I think especially these kind of decisions are best to use mental models like this we will talk today to help you solve problems, or at least get a better understanding of your possibilities and a better basic setup of arguments to make better decisions. I see some more questions. I will just randomly read some for you. It's also like, how do I start my career without wing what I want? How will I earn an income? Now I can say better. How do I earn an income in the next 5 years? Should I exit my sales job, well paid, in the chemical industry to do a PhD in chemistry? It's really practical uncertainties you're facing. Should I buy or rent a house in Hamburg, Germany? That's a question I asked myself as well. Choosing a medical specialty after my studies. So a lot of questions here. Going for a new job or continue my break. Okay, I think we read many questions. And I think these questions you have in mind now, they could also help you maybe while listening to the keynotes to try to really make use of the techniques. So I think we should start with the keynotes now. I would pass the screen to Simon, and yeah, the screen is yours.
Yeah, thank you so much, and apologies again for in and out. Thank you so much for your questions. Right, I see a lot of very tactical and practical questions here around, you know, should I leave this job and do something else? What should I do after school? Should I do a PhD? Should I do education? But then also, interestingly, bigger topics. Right, Matthias Müller-Pove calls out, you know, are these mental models also relevant to actually solve the real problems in this world, climate change, etc. Idiots in political charge. I love it. So let me be very practical, right? So, but still try to use some of the concepts and mental models that we have in the book. So the first thing I want to talk about is optionality, right? So think of your career in terms of optionality. Options, what are options, right? An option is the right, but not the duty to do or to get something in the future, right? So option is the duty, is the right, but not the duty to get or to do something in the future. And that is really based from, or is definitely a finance model, right? So it really is an insurance against uncertainty in the future. And I think it's extremely important because the world we live in, the US military calls it the VUCA world, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous, right? And I think that's how we all feel, particularly after COVID-19. We don't know how long this pandemic is going on. We don't know if there are variants of concern who continue to spread, you know, proliferating and spreading, etc. So, you know, thinking in optionality means building a safety net, building a baseline, and then afterwards experimenting, meaning increasing almost the volatility of your outcomes, but only after you build your safety net, right? And so the very specific advice I have for many people who have specific job questions right now is the following, right? I think that you should select a job, particularly if it's the first one or one of the first out of university. You should select a job that helps you build capital And I don't mean necessarily financial capital. Of course, having a job that's well paid is very important. But what I mean more than that is human capital. And I know human capital sounds, again, very technical, very kind of instrumental. But if you drill down into that expression, what it means is having marketable skills that will help you choose a different path later on. So you don't want to be locked in. You don't want to do, in the beginning of your career, you don't want to be a one-trick horse, essentially, only being able to do one thing. You want to do something that you can build up on, skills that you can build up on. And one thing that I truly think is currently the case, and I don't think you need to go into AI and machine learning, but I think a general understanding of statistics, a general understanding of analytics, maybe even a basic concept of how coding works, how information technology works, is important now and will be more important in the future, right? And I think that's a very, very important point to understand, that you are laying the groundworks, and I think technical ideas and technical capabilities such as statistics is one thing, but communicating correctly via email and person, in Zoom calls, etc., is probably another thing. And why should you do this in the beginning? Well, because you're flexible enough to get up again, right? You are your kind of burn rate is also low. You have fewer duties in terms of family, mortgage, and the younger you are, for example, the easier it is to learn something. So I would really urge you about thinking about optionality in terms of your career. The second question, or the second type of question, right, more of the kind of the important ones, right, making an impact, solving the big problems, is the mental model of counterfactuals. Again, counterfactuals sound very technical, but what it is essentially is, in absence of you doing something, what would have happened, right? So an example for this is, imagine you were a doctor and you work in the ICU, right, intensive care unit. That's your choice, right? And you've made the choice because what you are solving for, right? Your goal in life is to, let's say, save as many lives as possible. And I think that's obviously it's a very good goal and very admirable. But the question you should really ask is, how much of a difference am I making with me being the doctor, right? And so the right question to ask is, in my absence, right, me not being the doctor, what would have happened? Well, the most likely explanation for that situation is that someone else, probably quite similarly qualified, would have taken my job. And so the real difference, the real impact you make in this world is only the difference between the lives that you save versus the life that the next best saves. And if you think that you are really good, you are a tremendous doctor and you are able to save many more lives than the next one, that's great. But if we're all honest, there's a competition for the medical profession, for example, and we have very good doctors. And so the real question is, if you think about impact, if you really want to maximize impact in your career, the real question is, what is the counterfactual? Where would you make most impact compared to your absence? And so I urge you all, or many of you, some of you might already be familiar with that concept or that movement, the effective altruist movement. Effective altruism is all about shaping your career and making career choices to make the impact, to maximize the impact in your life. So Google that, and I think that gives you lots of information and get you down the rabbit hole. Okay, and the last mental model that I want to introduce is the skill versus luck continuum. So as you all, probably most of you, seen yesterday, the disastrous outcome for the German soccer team, right, losing against England 2-0. Well, why is that? Did the German team, the German Mannschaft not play as well, or is that what's the true reason for that? And it turns out that all games essentially are determined either by skill or by luck. or a combination of those. In fact, most of them are a combination of those. And so if you think about a continuum between, skill and luck, on the one hand, right, one extreme is, for example, chess, right? It's all skill, hardly luck. The other thing is lottery. If you play the lottery, it's all luck, nothing skill. There are no professional lottery players. There might be professional blackjack players and poker, but like, a lottery or something, you won't be able to succeed against. So think about this, right? Every process in your life, every game, and I mean not only the games you play on the field, but also games you play in business, right, is somewhere on that continuum between skill and luck. And so if you translate that, for example, using that mental model and translate that, for example, in how do I build a network of people that can sponsor me, help me, support me in the future, right? Networking is typically being portrayed as, use your charisma and just network yourself around in, I don't know, a dinner party, for example, or exchange business cards with your seat neighbor on the plane. And I truly think that that you can think about, using that mental model and try to move closer to the skill by just being much more focused, right? So LinkedIn, for example, is a fantastic tool to be much more specific in networking. So if you really want to reach out, it's been super easy to just write people cold emails or cold messages, and most of them are always able to jump on the phone for 20 minutes to discuss your career, to discuss your questions. I have hardly met anyone who turned us down or didn't answer. So even the pundits, the experts, the big people in your field, you can all reach them either by LinkedIn or guessing email addresses. But the key here is writing concise and short emails, for example, to get them in a much more concise way. So that's an example of using the mental model of skill versus luck to think about strategically. To think about where do you want to be and how can you change your approach, in this case, the approach to networking, in a strategic way. And I think that concludes my keynote, and I'm looking forward to hear what Julia has to say.
Thank you, Simon. And that transition where we talk about the trade-off between skill versus luck, and this idea that over a long enough time horizon, you will get outcomes that you don't want. What you can do is make decisions that increase the odds of getting the outcome that you want. It's not a guarantee. It just increases the probability of getting the outcome that you want. And that's what we're all trying to do every single day as we apply these techniques to our life and work. So at that transition point, I want to move from helping you think strategically about your career, about your future decisions, to being able to design a framework that will allow you to take action on that right away. And I think it's helpful to think about this in kind of 5 parts. So one is building the plan. The second is actually preparing for failure. So imagining what will happen when things don't go well, not if things don't go well, but when things don't go well and how we will respond to those. And then I want to talk about 3 techniques from behavioral science that actually increase the chances of success for all of us. So step number 1, as you prepare to plan for any big decision in your life, one concept that it's really valuable to think about is the idea of a critical path. Right? And so if you imagine the process of applying to a university, taking the entrance exams, writing the essay or preparing the application where that is required, having the interview where that is required, and getting into the university. Those really are the only 3 items on the critical path. Those are the things that really must happen in order for you to get the outcome that you want, if you work backwards from the outcome. And of course, there are so many little bits and pieces in there. There are so many small actions to take every day in preparation for that journey. But starting by identifying each of those steps on the critical path and then asking yourself, am I really doing something that moves us further along the critical path, is one way to really quickly build a high quality plan. Because it can be really tempting with any kind of big project to say, well, like, I'll just spend another 30 minutes reading one more article. I'll read one more blog post about the best way to study. I will get another set of the pens that I really like in order to be able to write this practice exam. Those might all be things you choose to do. Those might all be things that are ultimately a little bit helpful for you in your journey, but none of them are really on the critical path. None of them change the time at which you have to sit this entrance exam. None of them change the date of your interview. So start with the very small number of things that are on the critical path and ask yourself whether all of your energy and effort is actually directed towards moving you and your goals further down that critical path. That's step number one. We call that prepare to plan. Step number two, less glamorous, less exciting, more important. We call it plan to fail. And plan to fail is the idea that human beings fundamentally are optimistic. In general, our brains believe that things will work out well, and that things will work out well for us, that we are in some way special, like more special than other people. That's a bias that in the social science literature we call overconfidence. Overconfidence is actually very important. If you think about it from an evolutionary perspective, overconfidence is what allowed people to set out on missions across the sea. It's what allows people to make investments in really speculative ideas. It is one of the fuels of innovation. So it can be a tremendously positive force. But overconfidence that isn't tempered by planning just becomes gambling. Right? At that point, you don't have a plan to be able to appropriately calibrate your risk. And one way we build that calibration in is right at the beginning. So right at the start of any new venture. And you'll know this moment where you're really excited. You can easily envisage a successful outcome, getting into the college that you want, getting the job you want, having a business idea that becomes profitable. That's exactly the point that we ask people to describe what are all of the ways in which this could go wrong. And so some people talk about this as kind of fear casting. So instead of forecasting, you're fear casting. You're writing down all of the ways and all of the moments where this particular agenda could get off track. And there are some simple examples, right? Like we run out of money for this venture before we have enough revenue that would allow us to borrow money to cover this cash flow. I don't get a high enough score on this exam in order to be a credible candidate for this university. Or at the the first round interview, someone tells me that I don't have enough experience, right? And you can immediately say, look, let's think rationally, objectively, unemotionally about all the things that can go wrong. And what are the things we could do, number one, to prevent those things from going wrong? But knowing that there are many of those things that we cannot prevent from going wrong, how are we going to respond to them when they do happen? And that process of planning to fail, we call it a pre-mortem. So instead of a post-mortem, you call it a pre-mortem. In advance, you imagine that the project has failed and you identify ways to prevent it from doing so. That's tactic number two. The last three, we put them in a bundle of kind of techniques that will really help you achieve your goals. It's kind of tricking yourself into success, basically. The first is a concept that comes from the behavioral economics literature called a commitment device. And a commitment device is basically a way of saying that I have two selves. I have the very best version of myself who wants to exercise and eat right and finish all projects on time. And you'll always be a kind and generous and thoughtful person in every single interaction. And then we have a human self. We have the kind of everyday self who wakes up in the morning and says, I'm too tired, it's too cold, I'm driving past a McDonald's. Let me let the future self, the best version of Julia, slide. What is a commitment device? It's a way to bring those two together. Perfect example of a commitment device is an agreement with your friend that you will meet at the gym, at the soccer pitch, every Saturday morning. What's going to happen if you don't show up? This person will still be your friend. Nothing very bad will happen to you in your life, but that creates pressure. It creates an implied social pressure that you should be there, that we have an obligation to one another. That's a commitment device to make you more likely to exercise. There are smaller versions of this in people's lives. You probably know people who go to sleep in their exercise clothes or leave their sneakers right next to their bed. More systematic examples of this would be something like a retirement savings account that you can pay into today, but you can't withdraw from until you are 60, 65. So even if I really want to buy something with that money, I can't. It's being pre-committed. So in all of these large decisions, once you have the critical path mapped out, what are the commitment devices that are going to allow you to do what we talk about as stick to the plan? And one of the ways in which you can do that is enlisting other people. So you can be your own commitment device. You can say, every morning at 7 a.m., I'm going to get up and study for an hour. That in itself is a commitment device, a contract with yourself. Another much more powerful way to do it, the evidence suggests, is to create accountability with other people. So to have someone else expecting you to study with them, to review weekly your goals with another person, to promise that you'll share your resume with someone for their feedback. And that piece of accountability actually makes a really material difference. It can make people twice as likely to achieve their goals versus not having that accountability in place. And if you think about that accountability for a moment, if you allow yourself to think about it rationally, you would say to yourself, but hang on a second, it's not real in a material sense. The person to whom I'm accountable usually, not always, but usually can't fire me, won't stop being my friend, like will continue to talk to me even if I don't do this thing. That's generally true. But the human brain, like accountability is a really powerful force for the human brain. We take it really seriously. And it's because of this idea of identity integrity. And that's the idea that once I've said something, I've said I'm a person who has made this commitment, we tend to want to be able to follow through on it. So that should also be the question that you're asking yourself is, what am I deliberately committing to? Who is holding me accountable for that? And by not making deliberate commitments, if there are things that you're avoiding making deliberate commitments around, like what are we putting off? What success are we putting off by not making the deliberate commitments? The final item in this bundle, and you can think about these as kind of adding up to a program of success. So you've set a goal, you've planned for that goal not to work and figured out how you're going to intervene on that. You've established a set of commitment devices by making your goals visible and social to others. You have some sort of third-party accountability. You're accountable to someone other than yourself. The fourth step is to have some consequences for that, to be able to make loss aversion your friend. Loss aversion is one of the fundamental concepts of behavioral economics. And it is simply the idea that we are much more attracted to the avoidance of failure than we are the opportunity of success. Those are not the direct opposites of one another. to put that in money terms, if I, on my way out to lunch, I'm speaking to you from the US this morning, drop $10 in the street on my way. On my walk back to the office, I will have to find $20 in the street, about $20, just to be back at an equivalent level of happiness. That's loss aversion, right? We fear loss. It preys on us much more than success. It makes it very hard for us to give things up. But what's the good news about loss aversion in your own brain? It's that you can actually make that really work to your example or to your benefit. In this case, you can set those consequences in advance. So let's come back to your friend waiting for you at the soccer pitch. Let's say the person who does not show up, or if someone is 15 minutes late for showing up, that is the person who is buying coffee or beers or lunch after the game. And that's loss aversion in practice. You're going to try and avoid being the person who has to do that. Or if I don't go to the gym today, I have to go twice later this week in order to make up for it, right? I have to make the pain of not taking action greater than the pain of taking action. So that piece of like, how do I build in loss aversion? How do I build in consequences for myself that might feel trivial, but will help me take action? Now, there's something really magical about the order in which I've spoken to you about these today. So when you have a goal in place, so you've prepared to plan and you've planned to fail, and then you've established some kind of a commitment device. People who do that, so if you just have those two simple steps in place, people succeed in making a change in their life about 29–30% of the time, which is not bad. It's better than zero, but it's not great, right? It's not an amazing success rate. But once you add these next two steps, once you have third-party accountability and you have consequences for not succeeding, you've taken advantage of loss aversion, even if in a pretty simple way, the probability of success, it's not a guarantee, but the probability of success goes up to 0.8. That means that in about 80% of situations, people succeed in making the changes that they wanted to. So imagine that, like really quickly with two very simple techniques, you can radically improve your own odds of success on something that you wanted to do in the first place. And I think that's at the heart of the conversation that we always want to have with people is there are some fundamental theories and concepts that if you understand them well, you can manipulate them in your own mind, then you can immediately put them into practice and use them to take action and to mobilize other people to take action. And by doing that consistently, you can upgrade the quality of the decisions that you make every day, but also the communities that you're building around you. That like better decision making can be a real force for positive change in the world.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, Simon. I think that the techniques that you mentioned are really good examples of how to use the techniques you have in the book for specific problems we are facing. I know that there are much more in the book, and I guess it was hard for you to decide which ones to explain here. I saw we had some questions in the chat that we could maybe talk to. I also would welcome everybody of the listeners to post questions. If you have some, we can talk about that now. And you might know this feature from Clubhouse. We can also bring you to the stage if you want to be visible. And we can also put some of you here to go into a dialogue with us. But maybe first of all, we can start with one or two questions I grabbed up, reading the chat and also following your talks. And the first one is, I think, more something, maybe a language problem, but maybe not, the term loss evasion. I think this was one question. And I think there are probably more listeners that don't really get the meaning of that. I would try to translate it in German as Verlustangst oder Verlustaversion. But maybe Simon or Julia, someone of you can say a few more words about that.
Yeah, we would be happy to. And so, Martina, thanks for raising the question, because it's fundamentally a straightforward concept once you have it in your mind, but it's so surprising in terms of the way that the human brain thinks about it. This idea that we are loss averse. And it means that we fear, in psychological terms, we so fundamentally fear losing the things that we already have. So losing our current place in the world, losing in terms of investments, the money that we already have. That in order to be willing to take a risk, we have to be really overpaid to take that risk, that we have to have such a positive consequence in order to take that risk, to move, basically to move us from our current place. Think about it as, in general, we as human beings are somewhat frozen where we are because we're so averse, we're so afraid of loss. That's a kind of fundamental psychological condition of what it means to be a human in the world. If you say, okay, I know this about myself, I know this about others, that in general we resist change. How do I use that to my advantage? How do I set up a world where I get to keep what I have already and get to move towards positive change? But also knowing that our brain does not like to be punished, doesn't like to have consequences. What can I do to take advantage of that phenomenon? So I have this positive action that I really want to take. I want to exercise very regularly. I make a contract with a friend that if I don't exercise very regularly, I will give them 10 euros as a for instance, right? I don't want to lose the 10 euros, right? I said I wanted to exercise and I sort of did, but it's hard to motivate myself. But as soon as I'm in a world where I'm going to lose something real and tangible in front of me, the chance that I take action becomes much more likely.
Yeah, and I guess to put this in other words, right, I think what Tversky and Kahneman also found out, and I shared the paper here, is that if you think about, losing 10 bucks or 10 euros versus winning 10 euros, the negative utility, the pain you have losing 10 euros is much higher than the positive benefit you have from gaining 10 euros. And so what Julia is referring to is this extraordinary power of using loss aversion, of using that asymmetry, if you will, to bind yourself and to hold yourself accountable.
Yeah, thank you for explaining that. I hope this helped our listeners to understand the technique. I also saw that there was another question that Matthias was texting with Simon, and maybe you could share this discussion or these arguments you had with us and explain a bit the question. I think the question was about the first keynote of Simon, where he used the example of the decision problem, whether you should become a doctor or not, and how the technique of mental model can help you facing this decision. Maybe, Simon, you could try to illustrate this technique a bit more. I think that
happy to.
Would be really interesting. Yeah.
And Matthias and I have been messaging in private already about this. So let's make this conversation explicit, Matthias. It's counterintuitive really to understand. It really is, right? Because that's not the way we think about this typically. When we think about a decision and what impact we have, we often, the reference point to that we use to compare our decision is oftentimes not doing it, or like nothing will happen, right? So again, going back to this example of the doctor, right? So again, let's say Julia is a doctor in the ICU and she saves 20 patients per day, right? She works 12-hour shifts and she saves 20 people per day, and she asks herself, what impact do I have over the course of my life, for example? And obviously you can just multiply that by the numbers of days she works times the patients she saves, etc. But I think the number that comes out there is not the true number of her impact. It is only the difference between her doing it and the next best person doing it, if that makes sense. So it is not, if Julia wouldn't, let's say Julia wouldn't working in the ICU, Julia would be doing something else. Well, because there is a competition for good jobs and for MDs, for doctors in this country, there would be someone else who might not be exactly as efficient and as good and effective as Julia, but slightly less. Let's say that person is 5% less effective and only saves 19 people per day. But that person is kind of ready to take that job, right? Like, because the hospital recruits, 100 doctors or whatever, and Julia wouldn't be there, then, that person would be hired. And so the difference is just one person per day. And again, we're talking about saved lives here, but just for illustration purposes. So the question is, where do you apply your skills? And it could be, a doctor or the hospital director, etc. Where can you apply your skills compared, and what impact do you have compared to a situation where you wouldn't be available, right? And so, one very simple example is, there is massive underfunding of certain cause areas in this world, right? Like one is, for example, malaria. Even though the Bill Melinda Gates Foundation puts lots of money in it, your additional contribution of, I don't know, $3,000 per year on average saves one person's life, because the next best is $0, right? You're always on the margin, if that makes sense. Like, it's not like someone else would take your place in donating $3,000 or 3,000 euros to the organization. It's you are making a true difference there. And I think you can think kind of similarly about certain positions that you're looking for in terms of your career choice.
Now, as Simon disappeared magically again, I think he has some technical problems. There he is again. He's popping back and forth. Hi, Simon again. I think you just finished your talk, right?
Exactly.
So I think we got everything you wanted to say. I think there are also some reactions to this example, because this example is a bit can be seen a bit provocative, because you're talking about saving lives and counting numbers, and I think this example is really good. I also read it in your book. It's an alternative way, or maybe a counter argument for people who think my goal in life is to find a job that makes a real big impact to make the world a better place. And what you're saying, I try to phrase it in my words, correct me if I'm wrong, is people tend to overestimate their own impact they have on the world. So as a basis for making a decision, this shouldn't be the only way they see. They shouldn't think, I have to become a doctor to change the world, if being a doctor is maybe not something I'm sure I want to be. So the alternative could be your motive here. Ask yourself, what is your motive? Is your motive, I really want to become a doctor? Or is it, I want to save the world? And if it's, I want to save the world, have a look at other options you could choose to save the world. And this could also be donate for a thing you think is most important, right? Am I getting it right? I think this was a really interesting. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I'm already getting lots of flack here on the chat that it's very utilitarian, and that I'm missing out, and that I'm talking about people's lives. And I completely agree. Like, that's a criticism, right, on this approach. And it's only valid if your goal, in fact, is to have the maximum impact in this world, right? So that's an implicit assumption or a requirement that I started with. But obviously there are lots of other professions where the same model can be used. You're not an ICU medical doctor, but you are a very different profession. But in terms of impact, is the same thing, right? If you work in fiber optics, if you are PhD in something, again the question is, then your goal is, where do I have the marginal impact in terms of my career advancing this topic of, let's say, fiber optics, right? And the question has to be the same thing. The question, I think, has to be, well, if I wouldn't do it, and I think it's really important that the world knows about this and we make progress on this front, you know, what would be, in my absence, would there someone else be, you know, within a year or within like half a year or even tomorrow, who would take that view, right? Or who would develop that scientific search and research. So I think this mental model, I think, is very important for not only for saving lives, but for whatever you do.
Yeah. Thank you for explaining. Julia also posted in the chat that they have a whole chapter about this topic. It's a really big one. I think it's not easy to summarize it in some minutes, but the chapter is called "Think on the Margin." And yeah, I think it's a big topic, as we see. And the critique I read here of one of our users, Oliver, is that he thinks it's a highly utilitarianistic point of view. You could argue that it's a really economic way of thinking of human capital. And of course, we should keep in mind that if everybody thinks there are some other people best to do this, maybe nobody would do it. And especially talking about the health issues about Corona, we see that the health sector is really important. I think this is what some users try to undermine or to give here also as a point, which is a good point, I think. But still, I think this can be also used as a technique for decision making when, especially the point of how big is your impact is something you are struggling with. Okay, so let's see. I think if that's enough for this question, let's see what other questions we have here. I will give the user some time to ask questions too. If you have different questions, just text them into the chat. But I also noted down a question that I think is really interesting, because there are so many different techniques, and I think not every technique is the best for every problem we have, and therefore you give very practical advice in your book. And but I would like from you personally, do you have favorite mental models you tend to use in your everyday lives?
Ooh,
Julia.
That's a good one. Many, lots of the ones that we talk about in the book. Mathilde, I'm going to cheat. I'm going to pick two, if that's okay. So the first one is helping me think about the way in which I might be biased as I come to make a decision. And it's true for all of us, right? We're all biased in nearly all of the decisions that we approach. And one of the things that we are constantly trying to stress to people is find a way to slow down so that you can be aware of those biases and counteract them. One of them is what is called the fundamental attribution error. The fundamental attribution error, FAE. And this just means that if something happens to me, if I am admitted to a university or promoted or hired, then it was all to do with me. But equally, if I have an interaction with someone where they're a little bit grumpy or something didn't go well, our tendency is also to say, oh, it's because of me. I did something in this situation. Or to say, like, they're a bad person. And neither of those things are really the case. Like, we are not so talented as we think we are, nor are other people so grumpy as they think they are. But we work with very limited evidence for other human beings and very strong evidence for ourselves. I know myself very well. I'm, complicated and interesting, and other people, you have very few interactions with them, so they seem quite simple to you. So for me, like, bringing that to mind, saying in any situation, it's nearly always more complicated than we think. And whatever is going on in the situation is hardly ever only to do with you. That like you are mostly not the hero of the story, that there are many other heroes of the story. And I think that's a really important message for people to have. Simon, you do yours, and if we have time, I'll come back to my second one.
Sure, happy to. I don't have the favorite model. I think counterfactual comes close because it is so counterintuitive and really changes the way you think. I recently thought more about signaling in general. So the fact that many times we make decisions not because we read the decision makers playbook and followed the did the list and the scoring models and the other tools that we present in the book, but because we want to signal something to others. Like we're all social creatures, right? And we all want to belong, right? We all want respect. We all want to belong somewhere, and that also includes the realm of thoughts, right? In the realms of decisions and beliefs. And so a lot of things we don't do because we thought about this rationally, but because we want to signal another group. We want to, I think to a certain degree too, and I think that's a good kind of side effect, right? There's a ton of signaling going on in terms of climate change, right? And climate action. Many corporations around the world are very, very much focused on doing good, but more importantly on signaling to the outside world, on LinkedIn, on having a seat at the table, etc., to actually care for the cause and further the cause of climate change mitigation. But again, I think that's the way we signal throughout. Everything we do, from the clothes we wear to the opinions we hold to the things we say, how we say it, etc., is abundant in our lives, and it's something that I think is largely underrepresented as the cause of truly what drives us in our motivation, if that makes sense.
That was my second favorite as well. I think that idea of counterfactual thinking is so important. So one of the phenomenal attributes of the human brain is that we can hold two possibilities in our mind at once. But we don't do it well. We're not disciplined about doing so. So the more that we can continue to do so, to be able to hold the counterfactual, what happens if I take action? What happens if I take no action? What happens if we succeed? What happens if we fail? And be objective about those outcomes before jumping into trying to solve a problem. The more that we're able to expand our universe of possibilities.
Yeah, thank you. I really like those two models. I have a really, really simple one. I asked myself the same question, and I don't know if there's a model for it too, but I would like to know what you both think about it. When I'm facing decision making, which can be hard for me as well, I often come back to the same routine. You maybe know that yourself. You are thinking about something and you are not sure what to do, and pretty often there's one thing that pops into your mind very, very quick, unconscious. And then you'd start to think, and you have these models, and you have this pro and con lists, and this mind maps, and all these methods. And what I really, really often come back to is this methods help me to secure myself and to lower my fears. But in the end, I really often come back to my first impulse. But the first impulse is very emotional. And as we humans, we are complex. We are not happy to be just emotional about these big decisions like buying a house, choosing a job, quitting a job, starting a PhD. So really often we feel what is right in our belly and our head and our hearts, wherever. But we have to use arguments to process this. And then in the end, I really often find that my first impulse was the same that I find after doing all these lists and stuff, but these lists still help me to reassure that I'm doing the right thing. So maybe I would like to know what you think about that.
I think that's right. There absolutely is a place for instinct in decision making. And the more expert you get in any category of decision, the better you're going to know yourself, the better that you're going to know the decision. But there is still a place for going through the process. How do we know that? Because in some of the most complicated decisions performed by the most expert people, we still use checklists. We still move people through the decision-making process. Think about deciding whether a plane can take off, deciding whether or not it's safe for a surgery to proceed. The people who make these decisions, who perform these procedures, are extremely expert at what they do. Typically, they have spent thousands of hours of their life doing so. But we don't say it's okay for you to do this on instinct, like you will feel whether the plane is ready to take off. When I say it that way, it sounds ridiculous, but we do treat a lot of other decisions that way. So there really is a place for our impulse or our instinct to say, what do we think is likely to be true? But that has to be tested against an objective fact base. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to, as Simon said at the beginning, bring fidelity to reality.
Yeah. And I think piling onto that, right, the human brain is exceptionally good in coming up with stories for our decisions once we've taken them, why they are the right decisions. I mean, some brains also work well of like always kind of doubting and regretting, etc. But most of us are pretty good, you know, once you take the decision. I think that's actually a bit of a risk with your approach, Mathilde, which is yes, intuition can work, but if you already know that you want to go this way, like we're extremely creative in coming up with justifications, and the process is called ex post rationalization. And just an example, like I was when I was graduating from uni, one idea, one career step that I thought was amazing. I always wanted to be pilot for Lufthansa. And I missed the train to the assessment center. So that was my dream of being a pilot. Kind of went up in flames. And then obviously afterwards, I was the best in kind of arguing why a pilot career would have been really bad anyway, right? They all get automated. It's like driving a bus in the air. You know, they're all alcoholics, etc., etc. So I was definitely not, there was no scarcity on excuses afterwards. And I think that also is the case before you make a decision.
True. I totally get your point, yeah. Unfortunately, we are running out of time. I see there are some more really interesting questions, and I feel bad to not answer them here, but I think we should slowly come to an end. So I have one last question for the audience, which is, what are your main takeaways? I think this is always a good question to ask yourself. After so much information, you have to digest it, but maybe there's some information that stuck to your head immediately. And if this is so, we would like to read it. So again, feel welcome to post it in the chat. What are your main takeaways of today? If you don't want to post it, you can also note it down for yourself or just think about it. I read one. Don't overestimate your impact. Counterfactual. Oh, it's popping so quick now. The chat is moving so quick. Maybe we can just have a look at it. Do you see it here? I think it's
great.
Okay
it's all
if we share it.
It's all wonderful. Yeah.
Yeah. Planning to fail, counterfactual, and the prep planning Julia outlined. Don't trust your standard ways to make decisions too much. Reflect on it. Yeah, I like that really much. To ask myself what my impact in the world is in a positive way. Plan everything that can go wrong and be prepared. Yes, Kahneman is a name I read quite multiple times today in the chat. Kahneman strikes again. Loss aversion is definitely going to be something in the toolbox from now on. Thank you. This is really nice feedback. Thank you, guys. How I can use loss aversion to reach my goals. Look at the personal impact. I've heard about most of these strategies before, but it's a good reminder. Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot for the feedback. Let's take a last look on our last slide. If you don't have enough, if you want to learn more, I really can recommend the book. It's published by Pearson, and I didn't knew that Pearson is such a big publisher all over the world. They have published really many quite workbooks like this. What they have in common is that they are really practical, easy to use, really to the point, and really good to apply in your real life. Pearson also published a lot of more learning materials for schools, for universities, but also for people like us who just like to improve our knowledge and our techniques. They have also books about business models, about leadership, so I can recommend that really much. And if you're interested in buying the book, we will send you the link to buy it also in the wrap-up mail, and we have also for you the chance to win it. So yeah, we will post everything in the wrap-up mail for you, and I hope you enjoyed the session. I think it was really nice, really interactive. And I hope you have a good day. If you want to be on more events, we will keep you updated. And yeah, I hope you have a really nice day. Thanks again, Simon and Julia, for your talks.
Thank you for sharing some time with us.
Thank you so much. I hope this was helpful.
Bye-bye.